I'm a truck driver. While delivering goods to a wealthy neighborhood, I accidentally overheard a secret concerning the fate of humanity. It was an urgent order. The truck was loaded with solar panels, explosion-proof doors, and reinforced window materials. None of these were particularly surprising. The most bizarre item was the sewage purification pump. The client's mansion in the affluent area was situated by the mountains and water. They used water source directly from the headwaters of a mountain spring, which was then processed through an underground purification system specific to the villa area. There was no cleaner water anywhere else. Those water purification pumps in the truck seemed completely unnecessary. Only after the delivery did I realize there had been a convoy before me, from what I could tell based on my experience. The goods in those trucks were completely different. They included everyday items, food, and even a truckload of new furniture. I jumped out of the cab and casually struck up a conversation with another driver who was also waiting in line, lighting a cigarette. Must be really rich, buying all this stuff, planning to open a convenience store in the villa area. His comment made me laugh, but something felt off. I wanted to chat more, but suddenly felt the urge to pee. I checked the unloading progress up front and tapped the other driver on the shoulder, going to use the restroom. Keep an eye on things for me, I'll be right back. Although the affluent area was well equipped, those facilities weren't intended for outsiders. I had to twist and turn before finding a public restroom in a corner, and after relieving myself, it took a big detour to find my way back. On my way, I caught a glimpse of two men in suits in the backyard of the mansion, discussing something seriously as they watched the unloading trucks. I stealthily moved closer, hiding around a corner. How long will it take those people to develop an antidote? I'm not sure. And you've been provided a safe haven yet you choose not to go, preferring to fortify your own home. Isn't that just unnecessary trouble? You don't understand a thing. A safe haven, 10 billion a ticket, and who knows if the conditions are even good. My own home is more comfortable. Could a zombie really break through a bulletproof door? Zombies. The moment I heard that word, chills ran down my spine. If I had heard this conversation anywhere else, I would have dismissed it as nonsense, but here I was, in the wealthiest villa area of this city, hearing it from two individuals privy to top-tier societal information. No matter how absurd, I had no choice but to believe it. I listened as they discussed zombies, becoming more convinced by the minute, but I dared not linger any longer. 1. For fear of being discovered, and 2. Because I needed to secure some time for myself. Seeing the urgency of their orders today, it seemed there wasn't much time left. I stumbled back to where my truck was now being unloaded. The driver who shared a smoke with me patted my shoulder. When you were away, I moved it a bit, and now they're unloading. Thanks. Distracted, I nodded and was about to climb back into the truck when I turned back and said, after you get paid today, buy more supplies to keep at home, food, drink, essentials. Try to stay indoors in the coming days. That was all I could say. Saying any more might bring trouble upon myself. Once everything was unloaded, my phone immediately received the payment, and I didn't stay a moment longer. Quickly driving out of the villa area, I calculated the money I had saved over the years and the credit I could potentially overdraft. Not too much, not too little, exactly 200,000. I scratched my head. 200,000 wouldn't even cover the cost of the goods I just delivered. Thinking quickly, I came up with a rather unscrupulous plan. I called the supplier again, telling them, there's another household here needing the same items. They asked me to come pick up the goods as soon as possible, and the bill was charged to the client we just talked about. The supplier agreed readily without asking any questions, simply instructing me to come over and load up the goods. Those people are busy building their own safety fortresses. A small, inconspicuous expense added to the account won't be noticed anytime soon. Items like water purifiers and solar panels are not only expensive but also hard to find good quality ones, so I decided to jump on this fast train. My funds are limited, so I must spend where it's absolutely necessary. Once I've handled these big items, I need to immediately take care of the essentials for survival. I drove to a large warehouse-style wholesale supermarket here. The daily necessities and food are very comprehensive, available in bulk with discounts, and most importantly, loading up a truck here doesn't attract undue attention. I found the duty manager for the day and told him everything I needed. First off, of course, were the supplies. I needed to stock up on things like toilet paper and towels. Starting from 30 boxes, I ordered a good amount of water storage containers, power banks, various kinds of alcohol for disinfection, and other household items. When zombies roam the streets, normal life will certainly be impossible, and there's no need to fuss too much over daily necessities. What really matters is the water and food that can sustain life. Instant noodles require boiling water, which consumes both electricity and water, so it's better to cook rice instead. I decided to buy less, only 20 boxes. 50 boxes each of small bread loaves and ready-to-eat cakes. I chose 20 boxes each of the most recently manufactured fruit and meat canned goods, 600 pounds of rice and 400 pounds of flour, 10 whole boxes each of soybeans and wheat, dried black fungus, mushrooms, and cured ham, which all have long shelf lives. I took 50 pounds each, 50 pounds of frozen dehydrated vegetables, chocolate and sugar for energy, 5 boxes each. I also picked up 2 boxes of vitamin effervescent tablets. As I glanced down at the wholesale supermarket's inventory list, I hesitated at the beer and beverages. My funds aren't plentiful, and I need to consider provisions for my parents as well. Every penny must be spent wisely. Beer, beverages, and snacks are optional, so should I buy them? The young man assisting me noticed my hesitation and smiled, telling me, "We have a promotion going on these days, as it's almost New Year. So if you buy up to 20 boxes of beer and beverages, you get a 30% discount. 20 boxes isn't too much. I don't know how long this disaster will last, but people always need some joy in life." I nodded and ordered 5 boxes of beer, 5 boxes of cola, 5 boxes of orange juice, and 5 boxes of coconut juice, which my mom loves. I added some chips, spicy strips, and small cookies, just enough to fill the entire cargo box. Looking at the fully loaded cargo box, I felt somewhat reassured. The cheerful young man handed me the bill. All these items together, after a 10% discount for the promotional period, came to $47,000. I paid, feeling the pinch, but calculated that my remaining balance should still be enough for other purchases. After leaving the wholesale supermarket, I headed to the largest pharmacy nearby. First, I bought some regular medications for my parents, along with anti-inflammatory drugs, cold medicine, cough syrup, diarrhea medication, and digestive aids. The most important items were iodine, bandages, and adhesive bandages. At the checkout, I also asked for some extra vitamin and calcium tablets. From now on, whether it's a major or minor illness, going out won't be an option. We'll have to rely on these medicines to keep going. 3. Basic food and survival supplies have been secured. Next is to ensure survival in the apocalypse. It's important to know that under such circumstances, human nature can be more terrifying than anything else. I won't harm others, but I can't let others harm me either. I drove to a hardware store where I had previously delivered goods. Having a good rapport with the owner, usually, I could easily get items that were difficult for others to purchase. I told the owner that after the new year, I planned to stop being a truck driver. I had contracted a piece of forest land and would be joining forces with Bald Chang. The owner, chuckling, patted my shoulder and introduced me to a high-powered chainsaw. Holding the heavy, sharp chainsaw, I knew that once activated, it would be my best tool for self-defense in the apocalypse. "That's the one." I ordered 2 chainsaws, and I also mentioned to the owner that I was worried about poachers and wild boars in the woods, so I might need additional protection. I purchased 30 hunting traps, as well as a lot of renovation tools like screws and an electric drill. These items are essential for the major makeover needed at home. After completing the purchase and registering it under my name, the shop owner kindly threw in some extra nails and wire. I thanked the owner, loaded up, and left immediately. My destination is my childhood home, where my parents currently reside in a rural house. In these apocalyptic times, no place is truly safe, but less populous areas are definitely a safer bet, nestled in the rural hills. Our home is sparsely populated and backed by mountains, with each household having its own well. The nearest neighbor is at least 100 meters away, and the house is discreetly surrounded by trees and bamboo, making it an ideal refuge. I reversed the truck into the front yard of our house. Upon hearing the noise, my parents immediately came out to greet me. After parking the truck, I jumped out and embraced them tightly. It was only upon seeing them that I truly felt a wave of relief wash over me, leaving me trembling. My parents thought I had been wronged somehow and frantically comforted me with pats on the back. Once I calmed down, I took them by the hands, sat them down, and explained everything in detail. My parents had a limited education and had never heard of zombies before. They looked at each other, clearly struggling to grasp what I was saying, but even without understanding, my mother still rummaged through our belongings to hand me the family's bank book. "Your father and I may not understand all this, but this money is what we've saved for you over the years. Tomorrow, you and your father can go to town and buy whatever you're missing," she said, holding the bank book tightly. I nodded firmly. My father and I unloaded everything from the truck, which took about 4 hours and left us drenched in sweat. The biggest advantage of our 2-story rural house is the ample space. Apart from my bedroom, the second floor was empty, usually just storing miscellaneous items, but now it was perfect for all the supplies I had brought. While we were unloading, I asked my mom to arrange the water storage barrels in a separate room on the second floor, connecting a hose from the ground floor to this water storage room to fill each of the nearly human-high barrels completely. Once we pick up the water purification pump tomorrow, all this water can be turned into drinking water, eliminating the need to buy bottled water. After unloading, I began inspecting the surroundings of the house. The bamboo grove in the backyard provided perfect cover from outside view. Right beneath the perimeter wall was a chicken coop, which would supply us with eggs and meat. Next to the coop was a small vegetable garden with a limited variety of plants. Most of our crops were grown in the fields, and this area was mainly for onions and garlic. I suggested to my dad that we move all the chickens to the abandoned pigsty, which was more secluded and soundproof. The freed-up chicken coop could then be expanded into the vegetable garden. My parents, being hardworking farmers, had a rich variety of seeds with high survival rates, fully capable of meeting our future needs for fresh vegetables. With all this in place, security needed to be beefed up as well. Possessing valuable resources could invite crime. If others knew how much we had, they would undoubtedly come after us. My father and I planned to electrify the top of the perimeter wall to prevent anyone from climbing over and to reinforce the back with the materials we had ordered earlier. We also replaced all windows and doors with explosion-proof materials used in affluent neighborhoods. Finally, we laid a layer of hunting traps at the front door, covering them with dirt. After calculating the remaining money in the savings from my parents' bank book, we could cover these expenses without issue. That night, I slept uneasily, tossing and turning, wondering if there was anything we had overlooked or hadn't purchased yet, leading to a sleepless night. The next day, with dark circles under our eyes, we realized that my parents also looked extremely worn out. After a quick breakfast, my father and I drove out to pick up the ordered water pumps, solar panels, and explosion-proof doors. On the way back, the atmosphere in the car was heavy. As I looked at the still bustling city, I began to doubt myself. Had I misunderstood something, or was it all just a rumor? My father, noticing my troubled thoughts, looked at me and smiled, perhaps trying to lighten the mood. "Are we still good on money?" my father asked casually as we drove. "Yeah." "Did we forget to buy anything?" I responded. "Let's swing by the supermarket. I need to pick up some hair dye for touch-ups." "What?" I was so surprised that I nearly swerved the truck. Dad tried to keep his tone light. "Even if it's the end of the world, life goes on. Your mom and I haven't done our hair in a long time, and the gray is getting hard to hide. Let's get some, it'll make your mom happy." I couldn't help but laugh and nodded in agreement. Since we were at the supermarket anyway, I decided to pick up a few extra things. Dad was right, we had to keep living. Knowing what I did before most people, I planned to make the most of our time, to enjoy the days we had left. I checked our remaining funds and splurged on fresh, expensive ingredients we normally wouldn't buy, like cherries, strawberries, and plenty of seafood. These foods wouldn't last long, and I didn't plan on saving them. They were purely for the enjoyment of the next few days. After returning home laden with bags, I handed the groceries to my beaming mother and dad, and I got straight to work installing solar panels and a water purification system. These were easy enough to fit, but the reinforced doors and other materials were a real headache. Installing them would make a lot of noise, too conspicuous. I was in charge of setting up the protective barriers, while Dad handled the doors and the electric fence. After 2 days of continuous work, our neighbor, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, came over with a handful of sunflower seeds, munching as he strolled into our construction site. "What's all this then?" he asked, sweaty and tired. I looked up and gave the excuse I had prepared. "Found someone special. I'm bringing them home for New Year's, so I thought I'd spruce up the place a bit. Wouldn't want to bring them back to a shabby house, right?" The neighbor gave a meaningful "oh," gossiped a bit, and then left. By the time we finished installing the fence, doors, and the perimeter electric wire, 5 days had passed. That evening, as we sat down to a lavish dinner celebrating the completion of our defenses, the TV broadcasted a chain of vehicular accidents in a coastal city. The scenes were gruesome, filled with screams and bloodstains. My mom frowned at the images, wondering about the magnitude of the accident, but I caught a brief, horrifying glimpse of something else: a person, half lying in a car, their face pale blue, eyes white, body grotesquely twisted, a zombie. I shook my head, feeling a wave of panic, and immediately went to double-check all our security measures. Seeing my anxiety, Dad came over and squeezed my shoulder, reassuring me that we were already streets ahead of everyone else. "No matter what," he said, "our family would survive this disaster." I nodded, hoping he was right. As New Year approached, the village grew lively with many who had gone out to work returning home. I took the opportunity during the shopping frenzy to buy even more supplies. Looking at the streets filled with firecrackers and various fireworks, a new idea formed in my mind. I bought out a vendor's entire stock of fireworks and stored them in our warehouse. Better to have more than less when the time comes. On the first day of the new year, we had the most sumptuous dinner ever. The second day was normal. though we were the only family that didn't visit relatives. The third day, the morning news reported several incidents of street assaults, starkly contrasting the festive news of the New Year celebrations. We sat tensely in front of the TV, watching as armed forces used tranquilizer guns on those who had lost their minds and were attacking passersby. Their faces were pale blue, just like the person I had seen in the car accident, eyeballs bulging and mouths gaping. They pounced on pedestrians. My father, with a grave expression, turned off the TV and walked towards the door. I'll set up the traps, then I'll turn on the electric fence. The zombie outbreak had truly begun. It started when a city announced that all patients bitten and treated in hospitals were exhibiting abnormalities. Then, the infection spread among medical staff, leading to the collapse of the healthcare system. Soon, attackers and victims were everywhere in the streets and alleys. News on social media quickly filled with discussions about this sudden virus. In no time, everyone shifted from the festive atmosphere of the new year to a desperate, apocalyptic despair. Experts held countless seminars, urging people not to panic and to stay indoors, advising against unnecessary travel, especially between provinces. But it was too late. Perhaps the virus had already spread everywhere. During the Spring Festival travel rush, the largest human migration event in the country, billions of people crossed paths, and the virus spread invisibly at a terrifying speed. And now, it was just the moment of the outbreak. While the internet and power were still on, I charged all my power banks and downloaded a plethora of ebooks, movies, TV shows, and even some mindless single-player games. With the days stretching ahead, I needed to find ways to pass the time. As I was downloading a TV series, shouts came from outside the door. "Uncle, are you home? Open the door. We're coming to stay with you for a few days." Looking out the second-floor window, I saw a distant relative who lived not far from us. Like me, my father looked out for a while and then went to open the door. I hurried downstairs and grabbed his hand. "Dad, don't open the door." In name, I should call this man Uncle, but if I were to speak from the heart, I'd call him a shameless, blood-sucking parasite. Ever since I can remember, he loved to drop by our house uninvited. One day he'd take a handful of green beans, the next a piece of cured meat. I couldn't stand him. I often swept him with a mop soaked in organic fertilizer. He dodged and cursed at me. Over time, his visits became less frequent, until I went to college in another city, and the bloodsucker began to stir again. One summer vacation, I came home early. Just as I entered the house, I saw him sitting in our yard with his blonde-haired son. Surprised to see me, he greeted me in a mocking tone. "Wow. Back so early. Did the college student get expelled or just skip classes?" I dropped my suitcase, pointing at the bundle of money he held with a rubber band. "That's my family's money, right?" He instinctively moved his hand behind his back, then stiffly retorted, "Your family, your dad's still alive. This money isn't yours, it's your dad's. I'm his cousin. Do I need his son's permission to borrow money?" "Yes, you do." His blonde son scoffed disdainfully. I glared at him, and he shut up. "Did you write a promissory note? What's the interest?" Hearing this, the parasite seemed to hear some incredible tale, exaggeratedly crying out, raising his voice, "Look at this. Being a college student is so great." An ungrateful white-eyed wolf who doesn't recognize his relatives, even calculating interest, forgetting his ancestors. His shouting drew a crowd of onlookers. My father has been an honest farmer all his life, barely making any money after I started college. Our family's expenses increased even more. Some well-meaning person took the opportunity to tell me he borrowed money because he was arranging a marriage for his son and needed to buy respectable clothes. I looked at the thickness of the bundle of money, clothes worth 3,000 yuan. I snorted coldly, stepped forward, snatched the money, and kicked him out the door. A turd in gold is still a turd. Instead of borrowing for clothes, better to be reborn sooner. He cursed back from behind the iron gate but dared not step closer. After that, I never saw him at our house again. The apocalypse isn't scary. The terrifying part is being targeted in a post-apocalyptic world. I was about to give my dad a lengthy lecture on how unwise it is to help others during the apocalypse. Unexpectedly, he patted my hand and said, "Even if your dad is confused, I understand these things." He turned and cranked up the power of the electric fence to its maximum. "Let's go. I wonder what delicious dish your mom has cooked today." He walked towards the house, his arm over my shoulder. "Probably just the leftovers from New Year's. They've been reheated for 4 days and you're still eating them." That night, I couldn't sleep. I grabbed a can of Coke and sat by the triangular window in the corner of the second floor. I pulled back the thick blackout curtains just enough to peek through a tiny slit. Even though all security measures were in place, I still felt uneasy. I thought I was just being paranoid, but it turned out I was catching a turtle in a jar. In the moonlight, a sneaky figure appeared at our big iron gate. He was hunched over, looking around cautiously. He moved from the gate to the perimeter wall, sizing it up for a long time. Following the wall, he approached right beneath my window. That's when I clearly saw he was holding something in his hand. It was a small, portable folding ladder. He unfolded the ladder and set it up, holding the coke. I coldly watched his actions, which were tantamount to seeking his own death. You can defy the heavens, but you can't defy your fate. I closed the curtains, choosing not to watch anymore. Within a minute, an extremely agonizing scream and the crackling sound of the electric grid woke up my parents. They rushed over in their pajamas. What was that noise? It's nothing, just the sound of reincarnation. The next day, before dawn, my mom got up early, wrapped in a blanket. She came over and squeezed my shoulder. Son, go get some sleep. I'll keep watch for you. It's okay. Are you hungry, Mom? I'll go make some breakfast. Staying up late was common when I used to drive trucks, and with this worrisome environment, I couldn't sleep at all. I went to the kitchen to check around. There were a few shrimp left from the New Year's stock, barely alive, just right to boil them up and give them a quick end. I threw in some vegetables and noodles into the pot. Just as I was fishing out the steaming noodles, a quarrel erupted outside. My heart raced. I put down the utensils and rushed to the second floor. My mom was intently watching the situation outside the big iron gate. Seeing me, she pointed to a blond young man outside the gate. Do you remember him, your uncle's son, Jonathan? I nodded. Of course, I remembered, but I didn't expect this kid to be so persistent, not changing his hair color for years. Several burly, fierce-looking men followed behind Jonathan. He nodded and bowed to these strong men, pointing towards our house. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it surely wasn't good. The men, true to their appearance, boldly approached our big iron gate to knock. Predictably, they were caught by the preset bear traps. I frowned and clicked my tongue. A device meant for zombies was wasted just like that. The other lackeys, spurred by their leader's pig-like screams, surrounded and beat up Jonathan. He let out his voice fully, begging, "Spare me, spare me. I didn't lie to you. Their son has come back. They surely have supplies. You agreed to offset my debts with their supplies. You agreed. Well, so he wanted to use our supplies to offset his debts. Who gave him such courage?" Jonathan rolled and crawled out from the beating. Again pointing at our perimeter wall. "This wall can definitely be climbed, and then, my brothers, you can take whatever supplies you want." The lackeys looked at the high wall skeptically. "How can we climb that?" Jonathan, at a loss, suddenly ran towards his father, who was collapsed by the wall. My eyesight is good. I clearly saw his father was not yet dead, still desperately clutching at Jonathan's clothes. Jonathan kicked the person away and hurriedly handed the ladder under him to several strong men as if presenting a treasure. It was quite a scene of fatherly love and filial piety. I brought over the noodles and sat with my mom to eat and watch. Although this group was reckless, they weren't foolish enough to not realize the electric fence was live. They took the ladder and, out of frustration, smashed it fiercely against the walls of our house. A loud clanging noise ensued. "Are you trying to fool us? I'm telling you, either you go in there and bring out the supplies yourself, or we'll treat you as the supplies." Jonathan was somewhat desperate. He clung to our fence and shouted, "You heartless people, not helping the dying." The strong men ignored him and turned to help their limping leader leave. I watched the direction they were leaving in. The leader, who was limping because of an injury, turned back and glared fiercely at our house. At noon, my mom made some roast meat, but the food tasted bland to me. Jonathan could no longer stir up any trouble, but the debt collectors were a bigger concern. They would certainly not let things rest. Our home was in a remote location. The largest outbreak of zombies hadn't hit yet, but order was already beginning to break down. During the meal, our family discussed our options. Pretending no one was home was no longer possible. We could only pretend to be as short on supplies as everyone else. We meticulously planned our days, relying on our reserves and the vegetables we could grow. Our family could survive over a year without leaving the house. If after a year even we couldn't hold out, it meant that no ordinary person could survive on this land anymore. At that point, we might as well cut a small wound on our hands and smear some zombie blood on it, a painless reincarnation. In the first few days, I still harbored a stroke of luck. Our village was so far away. And now they had started to seal off the village. Perhaps our village could become a sanctuary in these apocalyptic times. However, all fantasies were shattered on the morning of the 7th day. I was still sleeping by the window. The sunlight peeking through the gaps was a bit glaring. I groggily opened my eyes and instinctively looked outside. I saw a zombie with an odd posture and pale blue skin crouched by our fence. It was gnawing on a chunk of charred flesh that Jonathan hadn't taken away. Despite being prepared, the sight still shocked me. I stumbled from the window to the bathroom, throwing up uncontrollably, feeling utterly cold. My parents weren't much better off. The old couple never watched horror movies, yet now, they found themselves in a world worse than any horror movie. Nobody felt like eating anymore. We heated up a few cans of fast food and had it with rice. Especially precious to my dad were his few cigarettes. Today, after eating, he unusually lit one. His expression was solemn. From today on, don't keep watch at night alone, it's too much for you. Your mom and I will join in, we'll take turns. I nodded without objection. That night, we moved a thick quilt to the corner of the upstairs window for the person on duty to stay warm. The weather was getting colder by the day. I feared more people would freeze to death tonight. I filled several hot water bottles for my dad and left him 2 pieces of chocolate. Dad, if anything happens, call me right away. I'll replace you at 5 in the morning. His brows were furrowed, as if he was pondering something. As I turned to leave, he called out to me, "Am I quite useless, Dad? Why would you say that?" I turned back, looking at him puzzled. My dad, sitting by the window wrapped in a blanket, had his white hair visible from my angle. "That base you mentioned, the base." I had only mentioned it briefly on the first day I came home when explaining the situation to my parents. "Dad, why do you remember the base?" He raised his hand and wiped his face. "That base must be very safe, right? The people there don't have to worry about growing food or running out of supplies." For a moment, I was stunned, unsure how to respond. He sighed heavily. "I'm not capable enough. I can't earn enough money to send you to that base." My dad had never shed tears in front of me before. At this moment, my voice was choked with emotion. "It's Dad's fault." My eyes started to feel warm. I couldn't help but clench my fists that hung by my side. "Dad, don't worry. Even without that broken base, we'll still survive. Definitely." The first few days when zombies appeared in the village were the quietest. Every household tightly shut their doors, not daring to make a sound. The zombies, following the scent, began to relentlessly slam their bodies against the doors. Our house was not spared from this ordeal. Almost every day, groups of zombies tirelessly pounded against our walls. The thudding sounds were chilling to the bone. Fortunately, we had reinforced the place beforehand. Even if they were to continue day and night for a whole year, they likely wouldn't be able to break through. Our family gradually became immune to the thudding sounds. We could now eat a big bowl of sauerkraut pork stew without changing our expression, but with luck. There comes misfortune. Some households still use the old wooden doors from when they built their houses. It didn't take long for groups of zombies to break through them. What followed were screams of agony and desperate cries for help from those trying to escape to the roads. We didn't know how many survivors were left in the village, because no one dared to send out a signal first. The electricity had been cut off long ago. At night, the whole village was pitch black. We could only rely on the faint moonlight during the night watch. Sitting by the window, I yawned. The prolonged tension had left me exhausted. As I was about to doze off, by the fence appeared some familiar faces from our family's past, Huang Mao and a few other strong men. They had survived until now. I perked up immediately, staring intently at the group. The night was eerily quiet. Even the zombies' movements weren't as active as during the day. I could clearly hear their conversation. "Jacob, you see, I wasn't wrong. This kid's house really has something special. Otherwise, how could the walls and doors still be intact?" Jacob, still limping, carefully surveyed the surroundings to ensure there were no zombies nearby before he spoke. "Credit where credit is due, kid. But how do we get in? We can't break down the door, and there's an electric fence." Jonathan was very confident. "The village has been without power for a long time. Where would their house get electricity?" "It's just a paper tiger." Oh, how ironic, our house did indeed have it. Ever since the power outage, we had been sparingly using electricity. We stored all the solar power we could gather during the day to supply the electric fence. Jonathan continued to urge, "Jacob, their house is so sturdy, once we take it over, we won't have to fear any danger in the future, right?" Jacob, being the leader, obviously had some brains. He scoffed coldly, ignoring Jonathan's suggestion. He pointed to the pile of animal traps at the gate. "You, go clear those traps. I want to enter through the main gate. Who knows if this kid's house still has backup power." Jonathan was silent for a long time. I pressed my ear against the window but couldn't hear his response. I just saw Jacob and a few others simply lift Jonathan up. Were they planning to throw Jonathan onto the traps to use him as a human carpet? Jonathan began to struggle violently, even starting to scream recklessly. He was trying to attract the zombies and meet his end along with Jacob's group. Betrayal among thieves was not unusual, but I couldn't let them destroy my traps and attract a horde of zombies to our place. I cursed under my breath, quickly ran to the storage room where we kept fireworks and grabbed a lot of firecrackers. By the time I brought out a box of firecrackers, Jonathan had already stopped moving. It seemed like something had been stuffed in his mouth, and he was carried by Jacob's group and thrown into the trap area filled with animal traps. Although Jonathan's mouth was stuffed, I could still hear his muffled yet heart-wrenching screams. This was bad. The smell of blood. Jacob and his group had already thought about the scent, so they planned to break down our door quickly. I quickly climbed up to the roof to get a better view. Sure enough, the nearby zombies started heading towards our house. I kept my cool, repeatedly telling myself to stay calm. Perhaps this was the best opportunity to eliminate future threats. I ran downstairs nonstop to wake up my parents. I told them to bring out all the prepared floral water, alcohol, and various other strongly scented liquids from the storeroom. As soon as I gave the signal, we would throw them onto the pile of traps at the entrance. My parents, still half asleep, hurriedly got up and started preparing. After giving instructions, I returned to the roof. Just across the street from our house was an old house that had been abandoned for a long time. The grandmother who used to live there was taken to the city by relatives, and now the house is empty and safe. I plan to take advantage of the situation there. 14. The group of zombies moved at a considerable speed. They quickly closed in on Jacob and his group. They intended to use my house as a survival fortress, so they wouldn't deliberately destroy the large iron gate. However, the gate was very high, and there were no ladders nearby. As the zombies approached, the group no longer cared about who was the leader or the subordinate. They desperately climbed over each other, trying to scale the gate. The chaos of cries for help and screams mixed together. Jacob, stepping on his brothers, almost reached the top of the gate at the last moment. A bluish hand gripped him tightly. It was Jonathan, who had turned into a zombie after being bitten first. "No, I can survive, I really can." Jacob's voice tore through the night. Eventually, he was overwhelmed by the group of zombies. The moment had come. I threw boxes of firecrackers into the old house across the street. The crackling noise attracted some of the zombies. They stiffly moved toward the house. It was effective. I was relieved. I then lit a string of firecrackers with a long fuse and threw it with all my might. The lively and festive sound of the firecrackers unexpectedly filled the village. While I continued to light firecrackers to draw most of the zombies away, my parents followed my instructions and poured all the strongly scented liquids on the pile of rotten flesh by the door, with no scent of flesh to follow. The zombies all wandered into the empty house filled with firecrackers. The sound of firecrackers continued intermittently throughout most of the night. If anyone was woken up from their sleep, I wonder if they would think this disaster was just a dream, that it was just an ordinary New Year. 15. On the 30th day of the power outage, snowflakes mysteriously began to fall from the sky. Normally, the temperature should have started to warm up by this time of year. Why would it snow? My mom divided the remaining heating pads into 3 portions, enough for our family to use for half a month. Looking at those heating pads, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Since the night we dealt with Jacob and his group, indeed no other living people had troubled us, but the problem exactly lies in that, apart from our family, we had not seen any other living people. It wasn't like the movies, full of thrilling sieges from all sides. Our panic stemmed from the silence, a silence that carried the scent of death. The village suddenly became quiet. Devoid of any other human presence, our family seemed like an island adrift in the vast ocean, not knowing where to go, nor where our compatriots were. My mom sensed the low spirits at home. At noon, she found some butter hot pot base. It was perfect for boiling those frozen meatballs and dried vegetables. The merchant had included a packet of sesame oil dipping sauce and a packet of sesame paste dipping sauce with the purchase. The lawn mist's strong flavors slightly lifted my spirits. We dared not open the windows, and the family gathered in the living room filled with the scent of hot pot, laughing and chatting as we cooked the meatballs. The red oil bubbled in the pot, warming us from the inside out. I noticed my dad, while cooking meatballs, also held an antique radio of many years. "Dad, what are you doing with that thing?" My mom laughed and added a meatball to my bowl. "Your dad, before the internet went down, always clung to the TV news. They announced an emergency broadcast channel, and your dad memorized it. Now he listens every day, hoping to hear some good news." My dad chuckled sheepishly and put down the radio. "I'm just worried that we might miss any good news or a rescue announcement." I nodded, fully agreeing with the idea. "Yes, we need to find a way to contact the outside world. If this continues, not only will we fail to deal with the zombies, but we might go insane first." "I think we will definitely receive some good news." I agree too. "Shall we get some drinks out?" "Sure, I agree with that too." 16. This winter was exceptionally long. Only in early May did the weather truly begin to warm steadily. My dad had harvested a batch of vegetables he planted in the backyard. For the first time in months, our family finally enjoyed fresh vegetables. I held my bowl and drank the vegetable soup to the last drop. No vitamin tablets, effervescent tablets, or freeze-dried vegetables can match the comforting freshness of these little bok choy. Even the hens in the coop have laid several eggs in a row. Vitality, it's a word I haven't felt in a long time. My mother cradles the remaining vegetables as if they were treasures. "It's going to get better, right?" I nod in agreement. It will get better. One great advantage of self-built houses in the countryside is that they are warm in winter and cool in summer. When summer arrives and sunlight is abundant, We no longer need to be frugal with electricity. Sometimes just turning on a fan at home can dispel the heat, but the smell outside is not so pleasant, the unresolved decay and the inherent stench of zombies outside the door. In the summer, it ferments into a fierce odor that assaults the brain, making one's eyes tear up. We hardly open the windows anymore, to prevent the terrifying number of insects from entering the house. We only air out the house when the morning air is at its freshest. Due to staying indoors more, my father's vegetable harvest has not been good, each one has wilted. Seeing the carefully tended vegetables deteriorate like this, my father's brow furrows with distress. Already irritable, he hears the zombies still scratching at the walls outside and becomes furious. He grabs my chainsaw, ready to rush out and fight them to the death. I quickly stop him. Don't be angry, Dad. Let me play a few rounds of Plants vs. Zombies for you, as winter returns. Our family's food reserves have dwindled. My father still clings to the radio, but it never broadcasts any good news. It's been a long time since we had staple foods at home, mostly just canned goods and freeze-dried food. Fortunately, vitamin tablets ensure we get some essential nutrients, preventing illness from worsening. My mother's wrinkles deepen day by day. She often gazes at the zombies that continuously bang against our door. Maybe I should join them. What are you talking about, Mom? It's almost New Year's. My mother snaps out of it as if waking from a dream. It's New Year's already. I remember it was New Year's when this all started last year. Yes, almost a year has passed, and who knows when it will end. I can't answer my father's question. All I know is that if there ever comes a day when it all ends, my first trip will definitely be to the psychiatric hospital. It's my turn to keep watch tonight, right? My mother glances at the calendar schedule. My father finishes another round of Plants vs. Zombies and tosses aside the game console. Why keep watch? Better we all get some good sleep. Dad's right. Mom, you go to sleep. I'll keep watch tonight. At this point, almost everyone's energy is exhausted to their limit, but I can't let down my guard. As long as we haven't been rescued, I cannot relax. My mother nods blankly and heads to the bedroom to sleep. We've run out of heating pads. I boil some water and fill a hot water bottle for her. She sighs softly, whispering almost imperceptibly, "It will get better, right?" At the start of the new year, if it weren't for the day marked in red on the calendar, I might not have realized it was New Year's. I sigh and rub my somewhat frostbitten hands. Snow falls outside. The relentless zombie that has been banging on our door all year doesn't give up even after his shoulder collapses. I quietly worry, what if there's eventually a drug that can turn zombies back into humans? Wouldn't that mean he'd lose his sense of purpose? I wave to the slumped shoulder zombie outside the window and whisper, "Happy New Year." Of course, he doesn't respond to me. He only slowly departs as the sky begins to brighten. I stretch lazily, planning to go back to sleep. Suddenly, the roaring sound of a car engine freezes me in place. My heart races. It's a sound I haven't heard in so long it terrifies me. I whirl around and look through the window, searching for the source of the noise. In the distance, on a country road, a camouflaged vehicle approaches steadily, a loudspeaker mounted on top. Searching for survivors, searching for survivors. We are the 3rd District Rescue Squad, searching for survivors. We are the 3rd District Rescue Squad, searching for survivors. I felt an inexplicable unease in my heart. I hurried downstairs to wake up my parents, after a brief family meeting. We unanimously decided not to trust them. I took out the chainsaw that had been stored away in the storeroom. My mom grabbed a kitchen knife. My dad carried a shovel. These people dared to make such a big commotion so openly. It meant they weren't afraid of zombies at all. These people were not on the same level as Jacob and his incompetent crew. Simple electric fences and iron gates couldn't stop them, just to be safe. Our family activated the highest level of alert, coincidentally. The vehicle stopped not far from our house. A few men in military uniforms got out. They held strange sprayers in their hands and vigorously sprayed the attacking zombies. The zombies collapsed as if their bones had turned soft upon contact with the spray. Our family huddled together, watching everything happening nearby. We were dumbfounded. "Hubby, do you think they might really be from the military, here to rescue us?" "How would I know? It's always good to be cautious." I held my breath and kept my eyes fixed on the group's movements. The man leading them had a tall and upright posture. He didn't look like a thug in disguise. He led a small team past the front of our house. For some reason, he suddenly stopped. He looked around carefully and shouted into the courtyard, "Is there any survivor? We are from the base searching for survivors. If there are any, please come out quickly." My parents looked at each other, firmly unwilling to believe. Our family maintained a tacit agreement not to make a sound easily. The leading man sighed. "Sorry to intrude then. They definitely had ill intentions." We all stood up, armed ourselves, and positioned behind the door. The group indeed came prepared. They scaled our gate in a few quick moves. Their agility and combat quality were especially high. Even in such a critical situation, I couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration. Perhaps playing Plants vs. Zombies every day had awakened some potential in my dad. He gave my mom and me a deep look. Before we could understand his intentions, he suddenly grabbed the chainsaw from my hands. "I'm going to fight you." With a roar, my dad charged out. The leader was clearly startled, managing to dodge my dad's attack with a large sidestep, but to my surprise, the man did not fight back. He kept defending and dodging, even raising his hands to show my dad he was unarmed. "Folks, calm down. We really are here to rescue you." My dad, the new generation's crazy Dave, simply wouldn't listen until he was gasping for breath. He finally paused to ask, "What did you say?" The leader chuckled wryly, deliberately keeping his distance to avoid another attack. "We truly are here to rescue. We were afraid that people wouldn't believe us and would miss the rescue by hiding at home. That's why we had to barge in. I saw signs of life at your house, so we took the liberty of intruding. But we really mean no harm. Don't believe us? Look, our equipment is of the highest quality. Why would we bring such sophisticated equipment if we were here to rob you of leftovers? Trust our country. It won't abandon anyone. That's why we are conducting a thorough search." Hearing his words, my dad slowly put down the chainsaw. He turned his head, looking uncertainly at me. "The base, can we really go there? Isn't it very expensive?" "Of course, sir. What are you talking about? As long as it's our country, everyone can go. So, are we really saved?" "Yes, you've done well to survive this long, so leave the rest to us." The leader grinned, pulling a small sparkler from his pocket and handing it to my dad. "Happy New Year, 20 SSSSS. Emergency broadcast to all national survivors. Construction of base in Zone 2 is complete. Welcome to your new home. Happy New Year."